Report Card with Nat Malkus, where we evaluate research, policy, and practice efforts to improve the lives of family, schools, and students. Look, there's questions about how to improve schooling, and oftentimes the numbers that we want to put up are things like graduation rates, test scores, attendance. And because we think about these outcomes as the near-term outcomes of what goes on in classes and schools, we look for proximate things to fix, right? Better instruction, more appropriate homework. Sometimes it's bigger things like standards. They're all sort of lined up with teaching and learning. But that's not all that goes into schools. Today, we're going to bring an innovator on to talk to him about what he's doing to address master schedules. Adam Pisoni is the founder and CEO of Able, and it's a tech company that's trying to tackle an operational problem. It's really a fascinating discussion because Adam has a different background and takes a different tack on improving the way schools can be run and changed. Without further ado, let's talk to Adam Pisoni. Adam Pisoni from Able, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So we look out at education. We've had a couple of day conference here at AEI. You started Able, which is focused on doing what?
Master scheduling.
Master scheduling,
Yeah.
the chief problem in public schools, right?
I think it's one of the foundational.
All right, so make the case that master scheduling, first of all, tell folks, what is master scheduling?
Master scheduling is a process that every school in the entire country, regardless of elementary, middle, high, size, urban, rural, governance model, whether they're charter, district, or private, go through that takes anywhere between 4 to 9 months, depending on the school, usually done by senior leadership, both district and school,
right,
to determine how students are grouped, what the course catalog looks like, how students select their courses, what the composition of each section course and program is going to be, what programs are implemented. So what I like to say, we say that the master schedule is sort of the blueprint of the school. It is also the intersection of policy, program, and the classroom. It is the way all change enters the school. Changes are operationalized through the master schedule, which determine how resources come together towards the student experience.
Right, I get it. So you're organizing time, you're organizing bodies, rooms. So perhaps we should pay some attention to how we do this.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a tech guy, right?
Yeah.
You got a tech background. Give us a little bit of your tech background.
So I have 20 plus years in tech and startups. My last company was a company called Yammer that I co-founded and was CTO of. Very different. We were selling enterprise social networks to companies. Right. So it wasn't in K-12, wasn't anything like this, other than we were B2B SaaS selling to large institutions.
But you brought some of those sensibilities to this other problem, right? You brought a sort of a tech engineering solution to a complex problem. How did schools deal with the master schedule? And I'm really thinking high school, right?
Yeah.
You got to put a bunch of bodies with a bunch of different schedules in a bunch of rooms. How'd they do it?
Actually, I want to back up because our first pilot school was actually in elementary. It's a common problem. Yeah, sort of elementary, middle, and high. But I think it helps explain why this is important when you hear how I sort of found this, because I wasn't looking for master scheduling or a hard technical problem or anything like that. So the way I came across this problem was as an outsider looking at education. I was certainly enamored with this idea that the model of education, the delivery model, all of those things are antiquated and were built for a different era, and therefore
factory model,
blah, blah, blah. Right. And yet, we've got some new models and new tools that are doing interesting things. All of that seemed very interesting to me, and I thought what I saw was a lot of good innovation. But the question I was asking wasn't what's possible if we could start over. It's if some of those ideas are good, what prevents traditional schools from making incremental progress in those directions?
Right.
When a traditional school wants to implement some new idea, a new program, a new model, what happens, And in researching that question, I feel like Neo that ate the blue pill, the red pill, or saw the Matrix for the first time. Because what I realized was that while people understand the importance of policy in shaping education, and they understand the importance of classrooms, instructional quality, curriculum assessment, classroom management, behavior, all those things, that leaves open this whole world between the two, between policy and the classroom. And I came to realize that if you think about any kind of student outcome you're interested in, or any kind of school improvement, probably more than 50% of the decisions that are made cannot be made in a classroom. Right. And so by focusing so much on the classroom, where there's a lot of important things to focus on, it leaves all this other stuff. And really at the heart of that kind of school change, that all of that is the master schedule. And it's also the heart of course, how the majority of their budget is spent. It's through human resources. So the way they've done it historically is a sort of semi-analog, semi-digital process where it's a very large multi-step process that starts with how you sort of do this allocation dance with your district to figure out the resources you're going to get, to how you're going to do course requests and analyze those, to taking those and doing section tallies to figure out how many sections you need by course, who's going to be assigned to what. That's usually done in a big whiteboard with magnets.
So you got to get your resources and then split them up. This is the challenge.
Yeah. That's an oversimplification, I would say.
Sure, right.
Right.
Mainly when this was executed, how was it done in an analog manner? You're attempting to solve this, to make it so that people can do things with the master schedule they once could not do because it was just too much complexity?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Exactly right. I think that if you went back 40 years, schools were less complex.
Right.
We didn't have IDEA, we didn't have IEPs, 504s, SSTs, pathways, RTI, whatever. And you could probably do it on paper and it was fine. You're just putting kids in buckets and putting in classes. Right. What makes this so complex now is the massive numbers of subpopulations and student designations and programs and the explosion of the course catalog within schools. And so all those old tools, which were largely analog, again, were magnet boards with periods and chips of the classes and stuff and spreadsheets.
Whiteboard markers, that sort of thing?
They literally have these very large magnet boards that down the left side will have teachers, on the top will have periods. And I've seen, wall-size versions of these.
Right.
In a 3,000 person comprehensive high school, it's an $18 million budget on the board.
Yeah.
You can't see the students. You can't see the composition of each of those. And they're trying to move them around. And that's just one of 10 steps in the process.
Right.
Part of the challenge is because it's not been a comprehensive tool, because you had to do it with a set of spreadsheets, partially your student information system, partially data from here and there, you cannot make comprehensive decisions about the design of your school. And so they've been forced to do it in a linear way that almost inevitably leads to some of the problems of inequity, some of the problems of poor program implementation.
Gotcha. So ABLE set out to tackle this master scheduling problem.
Yeah.
And, that's got to be a big process.
It's massive.
What's the basic approach? And how does that approach help principals and administrators make decisions? Ultimately, it's to me that what we're saying up front is you want a lot of things in schools, and you can't because you have operational challenges. And a lot of that is going to be rooted in the complexity of this master schedule.
That's right.
So if you can make those operational challenges, those levers that are stuck, because it's just too damn complicated to get in there.
Yeah.
If you can make those levers movable, then you open up options, right?
Yeah.
All right. So how do you do that?
Yeah, it's funny. I call that, and this is wonky maybe, but I look at it that our job is to build iteration capital in schools. Our job is to help schools be able to iterate more rapidly on whatever their objectives are and whatever the problems they're trying to solve. We're model agnostic.
Iteration capital is the ability to make changes
more rapidly.
Over and over.
Changes more rapidly. Okay. If we can do that, schools will improve.
Right.
That's my theory of action.
Sure.
The way we do it is twofold. One, we come into the school as a consulting organization on one hand, building capacity at the school to know how to do this better. We change the process. We change the way in which, the order in which they do things in a way that allows them to prioritize students that are higher risk, the programs they want to implement, as opposed to scheduling around resource constraints. And then obviously we're a very, very powerful and complex software tool that gives them real-time data on the implications of the decisions they're making so they can see the trade-offs. And like that is the core misunderstanding or thing that's maybe hard to see in the complexity of this process is the problem isn't just that it's hard and we need to make it less time. It's that individual decisions have domino effects that are invisible to the scheduler that only are expressed in school open. All schedulers are taught to start by placing their singletons first, which are courses that have only one section. What are your singletons? Well, usually they're your honors classes in AP and band.
Yeah.
So what happens when you place your singletons first? Well, none of your English language learners end up with enrichment or, so on and so forth. Or you end up with wild discrepancies in terms of the capacity of classes. Right. You got, I was talking to a teacher earlier today. She had 2 social studies classes. One had 7 kids and one had 30. How does that happen? Well, early decisions. And when you're in even a school of 1,000 kids, there's 400 unique sections. Nobody can see that data in one place.
Right.
To see what's the composition, what's the capacity, what does that look like at a teacher level, a student level? How many students are those students interacting with? Are they being shadow tracked? What does that look like on a program level? And that's kind of the data that we bring together so they can see the implications of their decisions.
So with ABLE, I'll just ask as far as, from a tracking perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like we want to have a reasonable amount of heterogeneity of sort of student ability and incoming ability, but neither do you want necessarily to have kids all the way across the board. So does this allow principals and administrators to sort of like package classes that make sense in terms of the students that get put together?
Yeah, we don't tell them what the composition of their sections, courses, and programs should be. We just give them data on what they are, and then let them make more informed decisions. The composition of those things are never what they think they are. In fact, maybe one of the most surprising learnings about how school improvement and equity intersect in a way that people don't realize is we implement new programs in schools because we want to help students who need help.
Sure.
For the most part. Because students who are already doing well, they don't need the help, right? So take pathways. We think if we align your curriculum to a career, it becomes more motivating or whatnot. And so great idea. We were working with a school that had implemented 2 pathways a couple years ago, a health and a tech pathway.
Right.
9th graders are coming in, guidance counselors are looking at transcripts saying, geez, this student's behind. They're not going to get their A to G requirements and their pathway requirements. We do. Let's make a 3rd pathway for students that need to catch up. So you end up with, potentially double-digit percentage of students who are in a non-named pathway, mostly black and brown students who are getting less resources.
Not a good pathway. Not the pathway you want to end up in.
The fail-out pathway.
Yeah.
So they implemented a program to improve student outcomes and ended up increasing marginalization and inequity. And that's kind of what we see across the board is you're like, I want more school choice. Where do those resources come from? That's going to end up hurting some kids. And unless you can make those trade-offs in an informed way, you're just negatively impacting students without knowing it. We're not telling them what to do, but we see a lot of gender inequity in stereotypical ways across the schools we work with where look, all the course requests for robotics, 8% from girls. Why is that? Is it a marketing issue? Is it who knows? So all of those areas, program implementation, equity, it's really at the heart of the school design that it has been overlooked, I think, for a long time.
So who takes advantage of the tool? I'm assuming, principals, assistant principals are going to take this and sort of organize things. Counselors are probably going to use it to help kids.
Yeah.
Teachers, they sort of are on the receiving end. Is that right?
Yeah, right now. I think so. The way this normally works is a district superintendent or assistant superintendent who understands the importance of this issue, brings it in, introduces us to some of the principals in that district. We work with a team at the school, which is usually, principal, assistant principal, guidance counselors, maybe there's a scheduler to build the master schedule over the 6 to 9 month period, audit maybe what they did last year and make those improvements. Students and teachers get their schedules at the end. I think in not too distant future, we'll have certain functionality that students and teachers will use directly in terms of course requests or supporting more dynamic blocks of time.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it is the leadership team that uses the tool.
Gotcha. So how many schools are you in? How'd you grow?
Yeah. So last year was our first full year of implementation, first commercial year.
Full on.
And we had 26 schools across the country in California, Texas, New York, Georgia, Tennessee, Massachusetts, all over, Colorado. And this year, we're hoping to get to about 160 schools.
Wow.
A fair amount of growth is coming from existing districts that saw the benefit of what we did last year and are now rolling us out to more schools. So we're in San Diego Unified, San Antonio
But
Unified.
each time, you have 6 to 9 months of hands-on work to make this work in a new school. Is that right? I mean, how much?
That is what they're doing every year, no matter what.
No matter what. So
that's not us.
The upfront resources that they have to put up, I mean, they're going to have to pay for the software, but beyond that, they're just doing it differently. It's not a new set of resources they got.
No, it's not a new set of resources. We integrate with the student information system at the district level.
Right.
So that happens once per district.
Gotcha.
And that's important because, of course, we're synchronizing all that data. But we have really a multi-year program we can work with schools to build capacity and help them achieve the goals that they want. Our goal is that by building capacity, they become more independent with a more effective process and tool.
Right. I've thought about scheduling in the past, and many times I've thought about it in terms of, if principals did an informed approach to scheduling, and I don't think that it's for want of interest that they do this, but I've often thought, it's just so complex.
Yeah.
It'd be very difficult for them to necessarily sort of match students to the best teacher that they have and so forth. And I think that by making the operational challenge of doing the scheduling a little bit more palpable, you do this iterative capital so that they can actually make these changes. Can you give me a story or two of things that principals or schools have been able to do, they've been able to pull off that you think ABLE has made possible?
Well, one I mentioned, which is we had a school that had this weird pathway issue, and we helped them recognize that and then distribute those students more equitably. We had another school that was really interested in creating teacher teams in order to align teachers with a set of students across content areas. They thought that they could only do it across English and ELA and math.
They just want enough overlap between the kids and the teachers to have some consistency within the building about who's seeing who.
Teacher teams is one of the more common things we're seeing, where, the theory is if this set of students has the same teachers for English and math, and those teachers can communicate and know those students and intervene when they need to, and also align content potentially across them.
Sort of school within a school without all the headaches.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. Very, very common. But in order to have the design, you need a common prep period for each team. You need to make sure that there's what they call purity, I'm putting that in quotes, in the students, and that actually the students who are supposed to be crossing those are crossing those classes.
A scheduling attribute, not a personal attribute.
Yeah, exactly. It's the term they use, and I find it weird every time. And what we saw in the schedule they were creating was it was going to be not a lot of purity. So some students had that experience, and many didn't. And because of the work we did with them, not only were they able to achieve more purity, but they were like, oh, we can actually do this with science and social studies as well. We can actually have larger teacher teams that ensure we can have greater social connection between teachers and students and more content alignment. And so that's an example. This is one of my favorites, though. We had a school in, I can't remember the county, where they wrote us on the first day of school and they said, this is the first time in 18 years we had class on the first day. It's one of the more common things you don't even realize happens. Many, many schools across the country, the students go to the gym on the first day, and they may be there for a week or two while they're trying to figure out how to finish the schedule.
Oh, man.
So school doesn't even start. I mean, some of the kids end up sitting in class, but the teachers aren't going to start until all their kids are there. And that was the only school in the county that had school on the first day. And so that county said, we want to use you for all our schools now.
I suppose they would. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
What a way to start off the school year.
That's
right on the edge of chaos. No, it's fully in chaos.
That is just pure chaos. Yeah, that is not the edge of chaos. So, and it is, again, it's like seeing the matrix and realizing how many of the student outcomes and instructional, even something like we want to improve instructional quality in our schools, right? How do you do that if you're a principal? Well, you do that through high quality teacher collaboration and PD that's integrated in their experience. That's a scheduling issue to begin with. And so if they can't figure out how to do that, then they're not going to do it. I mean, so much change that we want to see happen in schools. You kind of mentioned this earlier. It dies at the master schedule because they're so afraid of making changes without knowing what the resource implications, the composition implications,
the domino effect.
Yeah, they just don't do it. They just can't do it because they can't visualize it.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, right? A lot of teachers or principals even come to themselves and say, what about this? I'd like to do X as an innovative strategy. And you say, well, yeah, but we've got this. This is how we do it, and we can't change how we do it. And a lot of that would seem to die where the complexity of the schedule just keeps it grounded. It seems that schools are liking it, right?
Yes.
You have it in the districts that you've done. You had 27 schools last year, and a number of districts want to roll it out.
Yeah, pretty much all of them are expanding the number of schools in their districts. We had 2 in San Diego last year. I think we'll have 11 this year. Right. We had 2 in San Antonio. We'll do 10 or something. Gotcha. So most of the districts we're in are starting to roll us out to more schools.
What's the chief challenge that you guys are facing?
One is integration, which I think all ed tech companies face.
Well, explain it for lay people. What do you mean by integration?
We need a lot of data from the student information system, and we have to write back a lot of data. And our ability to do that is dependent on the participation of the IT departments within these schools.
Right.
Some of them are really great to work with, and others I think are maybe a little protective. I'm not sure. Also, the SIS vendors make it very difficult to integrate. This is something that all ed tech companies face. So that is a big problem. And, some are easier than others, and some work with us.
Right. You don't have to name names.
No, I'm not going to. The other is schools are incredibly complex. People don't realize to even represent a school in software and how they use their time and space and resources is multivariant. The number of dimensions that we have to allow you to visualize across time and space. You're talking about, imagine a school that has got trimesters, that's got an AB day structure except on minimum days, where they've got credit recovery. And so, a lot of students who are in this double block section move together into this other co-requisite except for these students because they passed this last year. And how do I visualize all of those dimensions? And that is a complex part. I mean, I think we're doing a very good job of supporting a lot of schools, but I think it just shows that what we've created in school today is this crazy complexity that makes it actually difficult to meet students where they're at.
So where the Able's tech is now, how quickly can you expand? Is this one of these things where we feel like we've pretty much got it and we can bring a lot of schools on quickly, or is it a district by district thing?
No, it's a good question. I would say we're at a part of the game where we're still looking for partners who are going to help us make sure we're pointed in the right direction. So the growth this year, it's quite a lot, but I don't think we'd want infinite growth this year, even if we could,
right?
Because we want to work closely with districts that recognize that this is the biggest lever for change that's not being invested in, and want to work with us to make sure that we're able to support their needs. I don't think we're yet at a point where we're like, we got the solution, don't give us any feedback, here you go, take it and run with it. Let me just add, in the beginning, I sort of alluded to the fact that of how surprised I was as an outsider that 95% of the, innovation and investment in K-12 is in classroom tools,
right,
or policy,
sure,
or new models or whatnot. And it still blows me away. How many LMSs are there, and how many, math games are there for classes and stuff? How many master scheduling solutions are out there? And now that I understand the matrix behind how schools and districts work, I recognize that there are more problems outside the classroom to be solved than in the classroom. But there's 10 times as many people trying to solve problems in the classroom than out of the classroom. Right. And that itself, I think, is a huge barrier towards any school improvement because of the necessity to operationalize change. Right. Change isn't operationalized in the classroom. Yep. That's where it's output, but it's operationalized at the school and district level.
Yeah, it is a very different view of schools that you have sort of latched onto, which is where's the opportunity to enable people to change the way these things work? And there's reasons we talk about it all the time, whether it's inequality or what kids are learning or whether they're college ready. We have all these questions. What are the other areas that you've seen that sort of are also behind the scenes that, you don't think get enough attention, right? Master schedule's one. It can't be the magic bullet, the only one.
No, there is no magic bullet. We look at what we do as creating the conditions whereby other improvements and interventions can flourish. Us alone doesn't do it. You still need to improve instructional quality and curriculum and all that. Of course. But on the operations side, I would say, the three big levers are people, time, and money. Right. And we're looking at the time piece. I don't think anyone is credibly going after the people piece in a way that's very student-centered. I do think on the money piece, on the budget piece, there are companies like Aliview that are doing budgeting in a student-centered way that is necessary because at the end of the day, a district is a whole bunch of policy and money that gets turned into people and time to support students. And if you can't figure those levers out, you're going to have, bad out. So, but those to me are the big three.
I've heard a cynical take on the principalship before when people say, well, they're instructional leaders. A guy has said, actually, the first thing a principal cares about is that nobody gets hurt. And the second one is that the buses run on time. And the third one is that everybody gets food. So those are their top three things. It strikes me that a master schedule actually can help on all three of those dimensions. We often think about, hey, we're going to do school improvement and we're going to get better grades. Does ABLE help on those other operational aspects that principals have to worry about and manage?
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned our first pilot school was in elementary. Yeah. We only work with secondary right now, but it was so interesting talking to this elementary school principal in the Mission in San Francisco who was talking about the changes she wanted to make to improve the outcomes. One of them was she had a very high English language learner population, and she had a high tardiness percentage. A lot of students weren't showing up to school on time. She hypothesized that if she put her ESL classes in the first period, students would show up on time because parents believed it was the most valuable class. She also saw that most of the students were on free and reduced lunch, and that meant that lunch sucked and they weren't eating. And she thought that was impacting the learning. Right. And she had read research that if you move a recess before lunch, they're more likely to eat. And so, we've seen things around buses, and it is amazing how much the operations of school impacts the learning environment of school. We certainly see this with districts that want to change their start time because of all this research. Sure. Some can, some can't, even within the same district because of bus schedules. Yep. So all of those things, yeah.
It's fascinating work. So what are you looking to do over the next 5 years?
There's two dimensions we want to grow. One is certainly more schools. We are providing this foundational tool. We want to be in all schools. So I think we'll regulate our growth based on our ability to service our customers. 5X is quite a lot of growth this year. I don't know that we'll do that every year, but tough. We want to keep growing. But secondly, I do think that there are a number of adjacent problems to master scheduling that need to be solved. And we look at our purview as sort of what are all of the things that are happening in school and district administration that are impacting student outcomes and the school's ability to consume change. How do we introduce new systems that are more student-centered? So we have a whole menu of products that we're going to work on after direct master scheduling that are just really unaddressed at the school and district level.
Do you have any competitors in this space? I mean, are you guys all alone?
It's really tough. Every student information system has a master scheduling function,
Right.
but what we find is the vast majority of the process is being done outside the system.
Right.
It just doesn't do that. That's why everybody has a magnet board, right?
Right.
Beyond that, there's not, there's like a bunch of older systems that sort of mom and pop shops that have made things. In my mind, there's no real credible master scheduling competitor.
So, Adam, usually when we talk about new approach in education, you know what we want to see? We want to see absences go down. We want to see test scores go up. Show me some outcomes, man, right?
Yeah.
So if Able comes in to a school that needs it, does what it's supposed to, I mean, I'm not guessing that you're thinking absences necessarily go down. That might happen, or test scores necessarily go up. But what is the outcome that you would expect to see? I mean, should we expect to see principals being able to do things they wouldn't be before? I mean, how would we just sort of know that, man, you've really made positive change in the school?
It is a great question. And we wrestle with it because at the end of the day, we don't come with a set of outcome objectives.
Right.
We tell them, what are your objectives? It could be absenteeism. It could be math and literacy. It could be a lot of things. It could be teacher burnout. They already know that the master schedule is one of the levers by which they can achieve these outcomes. And so we then help them achieve those outcomes through the master schedule. My ultimate outcome, as I said earlier, is can I help them gain confidence that they can have ideas, learn ideas, hear about programs, implement and measure those programs more rapidly so that they're not afraid of change. And then I want to trust that they understand their local context enough to try to make those changes. I think there's no lack of ideas. There's a lack of an ability to implement and try those ideas. And that's where we serve. Now, how do we measure iteration capital? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to work on that. I do think we are able to very easily measure, even a 1-year period, things like our ability to increase equity through having more balanced sections, classes, and courses.
Right.
That's an easy one for us to measure. Or they're certainly spending more time thinking of every student in the process as opposed to just manual labor in the process.
Right.
They're getting more buy-in so that when they do implement change, there's not as much revolt from teachers and parents and whatnot. Those are the kind of immediate sort of direct outcomes, but the indirect ones are really chosen by the school.
Yeah. Well, it's really fascinating. It's interesting and, in my opinion, admirable work. I just love the focus on operations. So much, we're so narrowly focused on teaching and learning in a closed system that is already there to kind of open up the system and try and work on operations is really fascinating.
We need more people working on operations.
All right.
I'm all alone here. No.
All right. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Report Card with Nat Malkus on the AEI Podcast channel. And special thanks to our guest, Adam Pisoni. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes or Google. Of course, if you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes, you can reach us at ed.podcast@aei.org. Signing off for today, this is your host, Nat Malkus.